Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Not so good, maybe because our house is not full today. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That's much better. Well, thank you all for coming, especially in a long weekend that we know that it's a few times of the year that we have the opportunity to go and run away from our works, from our problems, and just enjoy. So I'm happy that we are all enjoying the TSS together here today. It's very special. And today we will be talking about, did you pray today? So the importance of praying. How do we pray? What do we need to do or to ask when we do pray? Do we need to ask anything? Who do you talk to when you pray? So all this and a lot more will be answered by our friend Marcos Diclei. That, by the way, it's his birthday today. Don't forget to say happy birthday before you leave. And it's I'm very happy that you're all here. So I'll be doing the initial reading and praying, and then we can welcome Diclei afterwards. So our reading is from the book Happy Life, from Divaldo Pereira Franco and Joana de Angelis. Examine how much time you devote each day to your spiritual life. You work, get dressed, amuse yourself, eat, sleep, and you dedicate a few minutes to the incarnated spirit in a rapid prayer, a little reading, or you hear a talk, but at times you do none of these things. Man is not only the body-mind. Above all, he is a spiritual being who directs the body-mind, implements and demands spiritual attention to carry out the task that fall to him. The body needs care to live, but so does the soul. So let's elevate our thoughts to God, our Creator, to Jesus, our Master of Love, our guiding light, to all the spirits present here today, the incarnate and discarnate ones. May we have an hour of new learnings and new waking up of our minds and our souls, so we can direct our lives into the light of Jesus Christ. Be with us and bright up the mind and the heart of our friend Marcos Diclei, who will be giving us the lecture today. And so be it. Marcos?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon to those watching us through the internet. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to be here in this blessed house. Welcome to our guests who are coming, those who are just joining us. Welcome. Today we have, as always, important topics for us, because Spiritism is extremely important for us. And the question we decided to propose is, did you pray today? Or you may be saying, as I am here speaking, did you pray today, Diclei? Did I pray today? But that's really not the point. The question behind the question for us that we would like to propose is, why do we have to pray? 2 weeks ago we had a conversation about God, and that God is the supreme intelligence, cause of everything in the universe, and He is everywhere and He knows everything. So why do we have to pray then if He knows everything? What's the point with the prayers? And how many of us have prayed and asked for things and asked it again and prayed again, and at the end didn't happen? So why is that? What's the point of prayer? Right? Does God really listen and hear our prayers? Does God really receive our prayers? Right? And if He does, how should we pray? I think we have been educated on religion and praying, but sometimes we don't really stop to think about. And that's what we want to cover today. I just made reference to the lecture we had a couple weeks ago. And for those who watched it or who were here, we really learned from André Luiz that everything in the universe is immersed in God. Like a fish in the ocean, a fish cannot picture life out of the water because that is life for the fish. So are we with God. And André Luiz talks about the breath of God, which is the fluid, the universal cosmic fluid. And everything that we know and everything we are is a manipulation of that fluid. And he calls that fluid as the breath of God. So our thoughts are actually formed from the thoughts of God. And that's why I feel this is a very important question. If we are immersed in God, if we are always with God, why do we actually have to pray and tell God what we need? What is the point with that? There has to be an objective. And it's really because praying, welcome everyone, praying is really a blessed opportunity for us to connect with God. Well, we are immersed in God, and we also learn that we are like a wireless device, always on, connected to the universe. So why do we need to connect with God? It's because we really disconnected from God. We forgot about God. We live in our daily life so busy with our bills to pay, with the work, with the challenges among our families, and with the daily routine that we rarely stop to think about God. We rarely stop to connect with God. And the prayer is that moment where we really establish that connection. For some, that connection is much stronger because we probably developed over time that capability to connect with God. As if you were connected through an internet with 1 megabits large broadband and you download a video in a moment, right? Boom. So that connection is really open and wide. For others, we struggle to connect with God. We have a hard time even thinking, how do I start a prayer? Because we are not used to it, right? So I was preparing this lecture, and Amanda, my 7-year-old daughter, just walked by and said, I was writing here, why do we have to pray? And said, oh, Dad, I know why. So why? Well, because when we pray, we send a message to God. And it's exactly like this. Right? Even a 7-year-old know about it. And we forget when we grow up. It's like sending an email. Sometimes you send an email to someone, it comes back, or the connection is not there, it keeps spinning around and keeps in your outbox and doesn't go out. How about our prayers? Is it really going out? Or it's still stuck in our minds? Right? The only way, and we will talk about it, the only way for our prayer is actually to go out and reach out to God, and reach out, its objective, is if we can make it go down from our brains to our hearts. Because the heart is the outbox. You can't send a message to God through your brains only. We have to feel it. Right? And why we don't connect and why don't we make this comes to our hearts and send it? Because we lack a critical ingredient. And Allan Kardec talks about it in the Gospel According to Spiritism, and that ingredient is faith. But not the faith that we think that faith is that I believe in something. It's more than believe in something. Believing is an initial stage of faith. We have to feel it. And when we feel it, we actually know it. So we don't need to believe anymore because we know it. We feel it. Remember when Allan Kardec asked the spirits, where is the law of God written? In our conscience. So when we started to get used to that connection, when we started to listen to our conscience, we started to feel things that we know and we've forgotten. Right? So connecting with God or studying Spiritism or studying the Gospel is reminding ourselves that things that we know. That's how we build the faith. And it's the rational faith, which many people still haven't heard. I listened the other day an interview of Jô Soares over there in Brazil, a talk show, and a man talked to him about rational faith, and he jumps and laughs. What? Rational faith? Where did you come with that? Where did you get that? Because rationality and faith, they don't match. Yes, they do. Right? And we know that already. And that ingredient, which is faith, has two aspects described over there by Allan Kardec, which is he says that faith is human, at the same time human and divine. And I think we are familiar with the human faith, which is really faith in ourselves. That belief, that confidence that we can do things, our material things or things related to earth, learning something, right? Getting something done, executing a project, helping someone, right? Have that self-confidence, faith in ourselves. That's a human faith. But the divine faith, it's really that sentiment, that feeling that brings meaning to our lives. When we reach out to the memory of our conscience and bring back the reminder that we are immortal beings, that we have an objective to be here alive on earth. And that starts to help us to connect with things beyond the material world that we are feeling, that we often feel with our senses, right? That divine faith is really what helps us to overcome our challenges in life. It's what helps us to get out of depression. It's that thing that makes us change our mind from taking our lives and keep fighting against our struggles and imperfections. And that is what makes us desire to connect with God in one point or another. We must remember that faith also, as it brings the awareness of our immortal nature, it brings the awareness that we are destined to happiness. We are not destined to suffering. If things are tough right now, if we are feeling pretty desperate or pretty down, pretty low, we have to remember that God doesn't want us to be sad and sick and ill and low. He wants us to be happy. It's just the law. It's a law. It's like gravity. We don't need to agree with gravity. We don't even need to think that gravity exists, but it's there. If you drop anything, it just drops because it's the gravity. Our immortal nature, it's the law. The fact that we are destined to be happy, to reach the perfection that Jesus reached, it's a law. It's the law of progress, which is part of the law of God, which is also part of the law of nature. And we have to understand that, to have more strength to overcome our challenges. Because everyone here, we may come to the Spirit Center smiling, but we don't know what every single one of us is going through in our lives. We may feel that we are the ones forgotten by God, but if we could know, we would realize that every single one of us have our own struggles and challenges. Some, like me, complain more than the others, so you got to know what the struggles are because we talk. But others, because their hearts are benevolent hearts, they keep it to themselves. But let's not fool ourselves. Everyone goes through struggles. And if we don't have that divine faith, it's pretty hard to keep going. It's very difficult. And now I remember Chico Xavier, our dear Chico in Brazil. And I always remind ourselves that everything passes. Everything passes. Because the challenges and imperfections and the evil in the world and inside of ourselves, they are not created from God, they are created by ourselves. And as we learn, we'll get rid of them. We'll get rid of them. Because they are not part of the law of nature. We were not meant to be like that. Right? Now, we only usually make that connection with God when things are bad. When we are sick, when we lose our job, right? When our self-esteem is low. We rarely remember ourselves of connecting with God when things are okay, when things are good, when we are happy. But what's the point of connecting with God if everything is good? I don't have to ask anything. So why bother? Why do I need to think about God when things are good? When I'm young and beautiful, I should enjoy life. Yeah. Once someone told me, "What are you going to do at the Spiritist Center? There's a lot of people with gray hair over there. Go enjoy life." I have gray hair now. I'm glad I did that. Make that decision. But let's see. Allan Kardec actually ask a question to the spirits, 659, about that. And he asked, what is the general character of a prayer? What is the general objective of a prayer? Is it really to ask when things are bad and connect with God only in those circumstances? And the spirits answered, prayer is an act of worship. What does that mean? Praying to God is for thinking of God. Again, to connect with Him, not necessarily to ask. Those who have a profile on LinkedIn, which is a professional network, right? We connect with people. I bet you don't feel good when everybody disappears and come to you only when they need a favor. They disappear. You don't hear from them for 10 years, and then he comes, "Hey, I hear you working somewhere. Can you give me a hand on this?" "Yeah, sure." And then you do, and they disappear for another 10 years, and then they come back, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" How do we feel about it? Because we are very imperfect, right? So we feel, gee, this person really doesn't care about me. He only comes to me when he or she needs something. We feel pretty bad because we are like that, right? And sometimes that's what we do with God. But God doesn't have hard feelings because God is perfect. So He looked at us probably and said, what a pity, right? Because we are the ones missing the opportunity, right? So back to the professional network, to make it really work, you gotta give more than what you take. So connect with people, ask about with sincere interest. Ask how they are, and give more than you take. Because if we are only taking, at some point that will dry. Thanks that God doesn't do the same with us, right? So it's for thinking of God, to draw yourselves near God, really to establish a relationship with God, like we establish a relationship with a good friend. When we don't hear about that friend, we will reach out and say, "I haven't heard from you for a while. Are you okay? Is everything okay?" Right? So we should have that sort of relationship with God. Putting one's self in communication with God. And through prayer, we may do three things. In addition to ask, is to praise God for everything He or she does. God doesn't have a sex, right, as we do. But also to thank God. And that's where we fail miserably. Because everything we have, everything we are, we take it for granted. Or we think that is because of our merit. Everything I have, everything I am, is because I fought for it. I worked hard. I sweat for it. And we forget the support that we have behind the scenes. Starting with our guardian angels, or protector spirits, whoever you want to call it, and so many others. Following the direction of God, obviously. So we should also think about God and connect with God and pray when things are okay. Right? Very important. So that's, as we prepare these lectures, we are the ones actually learning first, and then we share. That's how it works. So that was the first learning point here. And then how about the point that we just made of, well, when I ask, I don't think God hears my prayers, therefore I just gave up. I don't think God exists because, my dad was sick and terminally ill, and I asked God to help him to get cured, to get well, and not die as we think, right? And he passed away. And he suffered a lot. So what kind of God is that? Right? How many kids at young age they pass away? So what is the goodness of God on those? That's how we think. Because we have a very short vision, right? And we feel that our prayers are really not heard. We tend to see, as many people say, we tend to look at the half-empty side of the glass. We look at the bad things that happen to us, or we look at the things that we don't have, or we look at the things that didn't happen to us. But we forgot entirely everything that happens, all the goodness, all the blessings that happen with us. We forget about everything we have. We forget about everything we are. We forget about the jobs that we have. That when we leave our jobs, we forget that we are going back home. We have a home and there's food on the table, right? Or we forget that we are healthy, as many people are in hospitals. Or even if we don't have anything, even if we are in a hospital, we forget that we are alive. No matter what circumstances, being alive, it is a true blessing. But it takes that understanding of our immortal being to appreciate that. It's not an easy thing, right? But that's our tendency. I want to ask Emmanuel here for a little hand. We're going to go through a message from the book Our Daily Bread. And it's really about how we ask things. And I'm going to read a few passages here. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus explained to his followers the necessity of complete observance of the Father's design. Don't we say when we do the Lord's Prayer, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done, which means your will be done, referring ourselves to God. This in itself is a big exercise for us, because what we mechanically repeat and not always we understand and feel is that when we are asking God, at the end we say, may your will, your desires happen, and not necessarily mine. Why is that? Because, truly speaking, we don't know what we really need at the very end. Things that happen to us, there's a saying that says, oh, it's a blessing in disguise. Or sometimes things that do not happen to us, it's a blessing because we really cannot handle it. Oh, why do I work so much and I play the lottery and never wins? What if we won the lottery? Maybe the last thing I would be doing is as a lecturer here at the TSS. I would be at the Bahamas or somewhere. So thank God I don't win the lottery. Right? It's like our children. Our children comes to us and say, Dad, I really like your brand new knife from Canadian Tire. Can I play with it? Ah, sure, son. You can play with it. Would we really let a 5-year-old boy play with a knife? Of course not. Only if we are mad. Right? But what kind of father are you saying no to your son? Aren't you nice? You should let him play. Oh, Father, Can I get your cigarette if we have the habit of smoking? Hope we don't. Can I play with your cigarette and pretend that I'm smoking? May say your 13-year-old daughter. Are you going to give it? Hopefully we're not giving the example, because they will follow our examples. But we will not. We will say no to our children in many circumstances, not because we don't love them, but exactly because we love them. Right? Ellen and I were thinking a lecture here from Rossandro Kingsley. Right? We don't necessarily need our children to like us or love us. If we really want to be a parent, we have to do what we're supposed to do. That's love. If they don't like us because of that, so be it. If we imperfect beings are starting to understand that, imagine God. So if something is going to be detrimental to ourselves, it's not going to happen because you're not ready. That's what Emmanuel is saying here. And I'm going to read the whole lesson, but just a few things here. Sometimes we pray and we feel obliged to pray because in our minds, in our educated minds from centuries, we feel there are certain things that we need to do to be on the good side of God. Right? And Emmanuel says here, the lessons and prayers were always, throughout history, interpreted by the vast majority of believers to be an easy recourse for obtaining celestial protection. It's an easy recourse. So you just say this prayer. If you really want to make that happen, you say 10 times that prayer and it's going to happen. Right? And then the day we don't say that prayer, oh, I forgot. And then I feel bad. Gee, I didn't pray. What is going to happen? So it's like a trade, a deal. I do the prayer and you do your part. It's a very childish understanding, but that's how we evolve. At least we are praying. It's an initial step. But the potential of that prayer is not fully explored because we are not feeling it yet. Imagine when we start feeling it, right? So it doesn't matter the words that we say. It doesn't matter how many times we say, because the form, the words for the spirits are nothing. The intention is everything. The sentiment is everything. I don't need to lit a candle. I don't need to be on my knees. Right? I don't need to be at the TSS to begin with. I don't need to be in a church, in a temple, in a mosque. We don't need to be there. Because as we said, God is not here. God is not there. God is everywhere. Remind me of Dr. Sue right now. It's just rhyming, right? But we are immersed in God. So God is everywhere. And I remember when I got to my teens, the rebel years, and I stopped going to the church with my mom because I didn't have answers. And when we are teens, we think we know everything, right? So we say, you know what, this is not right. This doesn't work for me. And my mom would come to me and say, you have to go there because it's the house of God. God is there. And I really respect anyone who thinks about it, because the good spirits working for God, they are everywhere. Yes, they are in the temples too. But if we are not there, it doesn't matter. We can connect with God anywhere. And for more that I did a lot of crazy things, that is something that I had in my memory. Thank God I had that. Because that's how it is. Anywhere. Right? And then about the feeling that our prayers are not answered. This is so beautiful. Emmanuel says here that in time we will achieve the moment when our prayers are integrally fulfilled. We will reach a point in our lives where all of our prayers will be 100% answered as yes. Everything we ask will be a yes. Isn't that amazing to picture that? When is that going to happen? We will accomplish this when we are actually spiritually in tune with the Christ. Because right now, I don't have space in my arms to say that we are here and Christ is there. My arms doesn't stretch beyond this. But the day that we start to understand how things work and we get to the level of Christ, everything we ask will be granted. Because we will love. We will learn what love means. We will understand God. And we will not be imperfect beings as we are right now. Because right now we are still, with our vision blurred by our imperfections. But one day, everything asked will be granted. Now we understand why Jesus did everything He did. Why He was able to show mediumistic phenomena by walking over the water. There was a purpose for it. Now we understand why after He passed away, He came back to the apostles. Because there was a purpose for it. Now we understand why He cured people with the hand, just laying His hands. Because there was a reason for it. Nothing was a waste. Nothing was to show off how good He was. He did it for love. He didn't miss a second of His existence. So every time He opened His mouth, or every time He shut His mouth, was for love, was teaching something. He didn't miss a second. That is love. And when we reach that point, everything we want, we will be able to do. We'll be able to make it. Until we get there, let us work and be vigilant in order to understand the divine will. I found that interesting. Until we get to that perfection, we need to be vigilant and try to understand the designs of God. And I remember Divaldo Franco one day talking about his problem with his heart that was with him for a while. And one day he stopped and started to think. He went in front of the mirror. He sat right here at the TSS. And he asked, Divaldo, what is this illness trying to tell you? What is this trying to tell you or teach you? Why you're feeling this? There is a question behind the question. There is a need behind the need. And until he understood that he had some hard feelings, something to forgive, some relationship to amend, that didn't go away. And the challenges of life are exactly like that. They will stick with us until we learn what we are supposed to learn. That's why we need to listen and try to understand what does God expect from me? What the circumstances are expecting from me? What is the change that needs to come from that? And when we are in good moments, I think it's worth to ask, why I'm having such a good moments? What does God expect from me? Or what my conscience expects from me? What I'm supposed to do here? Why everything is good for me, and right now there's a lot of people in pain on the street, in the hospitals. Why is that? Because God's favor us? No, because something is expected from us. And it may not be change the world. It may be really changing our inner world and help the others around us. It's as small, at the same time, big as that. Right? And sometimes we question about our missions and we think about transforming the world like Albert Einstein, right? But it's really not what we are here for. At least most of us, right? So again, going back to why do we need to pray? It's not only for the connection with God, but prayer is an educational instrument that helps to educate our will, helps to educate our desires. That's why we receive the yes, but we also receive the no's. Right? Because in our pride, we think we always deserve the yes. Or in our pride, we even do not bother to ask, because we prefer to believe that there is no such an intelligence like God. But fear not, if we believe on that, or if those around us believe on that, God doesn't hurry, and He doesn't have hard feelings. The day we pass away, and we get in contact with the spirit realm, we will understand those things. Again, it's a law. We may not want to believe in gravity, but gravity is there. We may not want to believe in God or in the immortal nature of our beings, but God is here, is there, is everywhere. Right? And then, how should we pray? And sometimes we think that prayers needs to be something so complicated with a lot of fancy words to maybe demonstrate how spiritualized we are and drive emotion on people with words. For those who are learning English or having Spiritism, in English for the first time, we know how hard it is to pick the words because it's an unfamiliar vocabulary. And sometimes we complicate too much. We should do like the children. Keep it simple. Right? And there's a man that actually said that, Benedict of Nursia, very known as Saint Benedict, right? And he was someone very humble, always busy working with humble meanings. And he had his rule of Benedicts that his followers wrote afterwards. And one of the things is really how to pray is keep it simple. Keep it short. Don't let people tired of your long prayers that looks like a lecture if you are doing a prayer in a collective group. Unless you are inspired by the enlightened spirits, with the good spirits, which is another story. Right? But keep it simple, keep it short. And he said something. He says that prayer is work, and work is prayer. And I felt quite interested because in our busy lives, we don't think about praying because we are in the office, or on the bus, or in the line on the bank, or at the grocery store. We think it's not the place for praying, so we refrain from praying. But we cannot be Christians only in the churches. We cannot be mediums only in the Spirit Center or on the Tuesdays or Fridays or your mediumistic meetings. We are mediums everywhere, every time, anytime. We are Christians anywhere, anytime. And we can establish a connection with God anywhere, anytime. Right? So St. Benedict talks about waking up in the morning, and Allan Kardec talks about it also in the collection of prayers that he has in the Gospel according to Spiritism, right? Wake up in the morning and pray, not necessarily to ask. If you want to ask, but appreciate that we are awake and alive another day in this planet. For more hard the things are, there are 20, 30 discarnated spirits that wish it to be in our places. For every single one of us, there is a large number of spirits that would do everything to be in our shoes, for more challenges that things are, and we take it for granted. If you are at work and things are tough, that tough boss, that challenging colleagues, they are trying to take the opportunities out of you and criticizing and persecuting it. Oh, if you take a little break and go to your washroom, pray for them. Pray for you to have patience and forgiveness and exemplify the Christian values and not reciprocate, not do to them what they are doing to you. because we are Christians everywhere. It's easy to be Christian here in the Spiritist Center, right? To our neighbors, in the school, anywhere, when people are really harsh on us, let's connect with God and gather that strength, right? Very important. At night, let's appreciate the day that we had. Thank you for another day, for overcoming the challenges, for having a bed, or for being well, or for having my family, for the food that I ate, for the safety that I have. How many people are in wars, or eating rice with dust in the ground, or dying of hunger, or in the hospitals while we are comfortable in our beds? I'm not saying that so we feel guilty about it. No. But reminding ourselves that we should appreciate that blessing. And while we do that, we also think why we are so blessed. Why? What is expected of me? Right? So those are the things that St. Benedict suggests that we do throughout our day in our lives. You don't need to go in the office and say, stop the meeting right now, give me a second. Oh God, people will look at you, they will call the HR department and probably put you in a 6 months mental health break. So don't do that. But even as you are looking to that person that you feel the negative energy, you pray for them. God, help that person. I'm looking at you, but not. Okay. Pray for that person. Say, God, help this brother or these sisters, whatever they are going through. Right? Because again, they are there with you, but we don't know the struggles they are going through in their lives. It may be way bigger than ours. And then if we were in their shoes, would be as Christians as we are trying to do right now? Or we would do exactly the same thing or worse. Right? And we had the speakers course the other days here, and one of the things André Luiz said is, those who criticize have the obligation to do better. Some of them are here. I was here. So when we think about criticizing, would I do better? And our ego will say, of course I would do better. Probably not. Right? At the best, we may do the same thing. It's hard to tell, right, when we are not going through that pain. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share. And then in the book The Consoler, that is also another and one of the last wake-up call here for me. Doesn't have in English, unfortunately, but it's a great book from Emmanuel as well. And we Spiritists, because we know about the spiritual world and we read a lot about obsession and spirits that interfere in our lives, a lot of times we think, wow, maybe I didn't need to go through these struggles. It is probably because there's an obsessor spirit after me, right? And Divaldo Franco is very prescriptive all the time. He says, well, not all obsessions are signs of depression. Not all signs of depression are obsessions. We got to be careful with diagnostics, right? We got to be very careful with diagnostics. But we tend to blame everything on the spirits. Everything the bad is happening. We may say, you know what? I don't think I need to learn a lesson here. It is because of that obsessor spirit or that. So here's what Emmanuel says to us, and I'll make it short. The question 381. 381. He says the following. Before we complain about that spirit, right, or that, before we think about obsession, we should consult our own hearts before we formulate our complaints or excuses, so that we may observe if the disturbing spirit is not within ourselves. It's easy to blame, right? We have the tendency to blame, point fingers. But he's saying, when we point finger to someone, there are 3 fingers pointing to me. Interesting, eh? 1 there and 3 to me. As a reminder, look at ourselves first. There are terrible obsessors of man called selfishness, pride, laziness, greed, ignorance, ill will. And we must examine if we are not victim of these perverse energies that very often inhabit the hearts of the human creatures, blinding ourselves to understand the light of God, blinding ourselves, preventing us to connect with God, right? To connect with our protector spirits, who we often neglect. We don't even remember that our protector spirits exist. We just ignore, and we missed a precious opportunity to have that conversation, that consultation, right? Against this element, these elements that destroy us, it is a must, a new type of prayers. That's the point I want to make here. That was a big learning for me. A new type of prayer that consists in work, faith, effort, and goodwill. So remind ourselves of Saint Benedict here, that prayer is work and work is prayer. We are not getting any favors by just saying words out loud without thinking mechanically. I may just be watching the Raptors game and be saying, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." It's just empty words, and I'm watching the basketball on the TV. It's like Amanda said, the message is not going to be sent. I'm not even writing the message. It's here, locked, but it's not getting out to the heart to be sent, right? It's empty. So prayer is active in actions. It's like when you say "I'm sorry" to someone, but you really don't care. You say "I'm sorry" and you do it again. You say "I'm sorry" and you hurt them again, right? If you're praying, we have to mean it. And we change our attitudes, whatever that attitude is, right? So, that's it. We are getting to the final minutes here. And the final wake-up call that I had is, we always get an answer from God. 100% of the time, we get an answer from God. But we don't pay attention. The answer may be a yes, or the answer may be a no. But we always get an answer. And this is actually I'm not the one saying it, but it's again Emmanuel, who is pretty straightforward on his messages. He doesn't sugarcoat. He tells us as is, right? So he says the following here. You have prayed and asked, just to conclude our conversation. Now calm yourself and be serene, so that you may receive the answers. So we need to calm ourselves and be serene. If we continue with our mind all over the place, we will not notice when the help comes. We will not notice the answers. And do not expect a dramatic demonstration for you to be sure about the indications from God. So God will not make a big fuss and have a poster saying, "Your prayer was answered." No, it's not going to happen. It's very subtle. For those who have eyes to see and ears to listen, to hear, as Jesus said very well. Right? Just like the sun, which doesn't need to be present on earth physically to give life to a plant, as it can be reached by its rays, God has millions of messengers whom perform his sublime plans. Every single of us have a protector spirit assigned to us when we incarnated. Right? It's the first point of contact with God. God doesn't need to come to us. It's like a CEO of a corporation has people dealing with every single one of the customers. He or she do not go to every single customer, not necessarily, because there's people working for her, with her. So is God. Therefore, pray and ask. After that, pay attention. And he says, something will come to you via someone. Something will come to you via something that will be given to you. A book, a video that someone will share, a post on Facebook, a phone call, a stranger that you encounter and will start talking to you about something that you are actually feeling or asking for out of the blue. Some people even say, you know what, I'm like a magnet. Whenever I go, people just come and start talking to you about those things and I don't understand. Or sometimes we are inspired to be that message to someone. We just feel compelled to see it and then, hi, good morning. And then we talk and we have a conversation that we didn't plan for it. It just happened. So God serves us through each other here. If we are at service of God, Paul talks a lot about it, Paul of Tarsus. In many circumstances, the advice and a guidance or a phrase or a blessing word will reach your soul in a conversation with a friend or a simple sign on the street. And very often, the answers of the Lord to your needs and requests search for you in your sentiments, taking the pathway from your brain to your heart and vice versa, as we just discussed. God will always answer. That's Emmanuel saying here, God will always answer. Let us remember the Divine Master and let us be sure that God is constantly listening to our requests. Constantly listening to our requests. However, it is important to make silence in our inner world, forgetting about demands and desires. Not only to listen God's reply, but also to accept God's reply. We just spoke about it, right? Because we just want to listen what we want to listen. And human beings, we are like that in conversations. If I go to a doctor and the doctor tell me, you got to stop smoking. You know what? I don't like that doctor. I don't know what it is, but I don't like that doctor. It's because the doctor is telling you what you have to do. So is God. Right? So it's an exercise, it's an education for us to accept God's will beyond our imperfect will. Recognizing that the Almighty answers are always in our favor. Always in our favor. Even if sometimes, in this spur of the moment, it seems to be against us. So sometimes it seems to be against us. Oh, my father is passing away. Right? And maybe there's 10 people praying for my father to go back because it's his time. And I am here keeping him because of my selfishness. I'm thinking about me. It's his time, he should go. Or if I am moving to a different place, something behind the scenes it's actually making those things happen because there's something better for us there. And we don't know. Right? And now, there's one experiment that I would like us all to do. I always do experiments for the lectures because it's a best way to feel what you're talking about. This time I couldn't do my self-experiment with myself before the lecture. I don't use rats or nothing. Right? It's pretty decent experiment. But the experiment was something that Chico Xavier actually shared with Haroldo Dutra Dias. And the experiment is the following. Chico said to Haroldo, every time you want to ask something to God, something that he really desires, not necessarily material things, with spiritual things, to overcome some challenges or whatever it is, write down in a piece of paper. But the date, write down in a piece of paper, very short, like a Twitter, right? I asked this, and save it somewhere. It's not to show people what it is, but save it somewhere just for you. And then observe as the days and weeks go by. Observe the people that come your way, the signs that you see, the Facebook posts, things that will actually come your way. And once in a while, go back to that little note, because we forget what we asked. And we get what we ask very often. We get the answers very often. But because we forget what we asked, we don't connect. And we think that God doesn't answer. I love that exercise, and I am certainly going to do that exercise. And I encourage you all to do. It's a great experiment. Because as Emmanuel says, God always answers. We just don't make enough silence to listen. Or we ignore the answers because they are not the yes that we are expecting. So may God bless ourselves, our hearts, and may we learn to love and learn to pray with each other in every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcos.
Thank you.
So now we're going to open for a few minutes for questions, comments. No questions, no comments? Are we all praying? Yeah. That's good. Someone in the internet, Livia? Question? No? No one? I'm going like this to see if I can see. Well, thank you so much for those who comes here for the first time. This is the time that we have our passes. And so I just ask you to stay. If the people who are sitting on the table, if you could just come and sit on the chairs. So for the peeling, for the pass. Thank you everybody who has been watching us through the internet. And we hope to see you again on next Wednesday when we have at 7 o'clock when we have the study of the books, the Gospel according to Spiritism, and also the Spirit's book. Thank you and see you next